Okay, welcome to those that are joining us from home. We are having some technical issues here at City Hall from the storm. We are up on the Verizon network. We were unable to broadcast on Cox Network tonight due to a signal issue. We're going to record this and put it out, but this is a work session of the Poquoson City Council for Tuesday, October 11th. And we have one issue to talk about here in work session. That is something that I think most people will recognize that we need to talk about here during election season, and that is the sign ordinance. So, Randy, who's going to present for us this evening?
Mayor, our lead presenter for staff will be Dana O'Connell, who is our graduate management assistant. He has taken the lead working with Debbie and myself and others on this. Council will recall we got into this for three reasons. We're here for three reasons. One, we have three different ordinance sections which dealt in part with signs. At times they conflicted. So goal one, or the first of three, is to consolidate them all into a single ordinance. So the person who reads an ordinance called signs in the city can reasonably know that they understand. Two is to eliminate conflict. We actually had a stand-up within our ordinance. And then lastly, to reflect the preliminary guidance that we received from council, at least for the purpose of preparing the draft, mainly as it pertained to signs, non-governmental, public right-of-way, and on public property. That I'll ask Dannon to walk it through. Before he does that, I would note for you that you have in your package both a copy of the PowerPoint and the proposed ordinance changes. They're line-in, line-out version. We've given you the whole ordinance. So if something is either lined in or lined out, it is a provision in the current ordinance. And with that, Dan, go ahead, please.
Okay. So good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here in my first presentation to Poquoson City Council. For your work session this evening, I have a set of three resolutions rewriting the city's regulations on signs. So some background, Randy touched on this, but City Council had a retreat in March in which they discussed reducing or removing the proliferation of signs in the city right-of-way. Previous city councils have found that right-of-way signs are a potential traffic hazard, both to pedestrians and to motorists. Council also suggested that we clarify the language of the sign ordinance and eliminate any conflicts between existing regulations. So existing sign regulation is divided in most part between two separate sections of the City Code, which is Chapter 6 on advertising and Appendix D on signs. Between these two ordinances, there are a number of passages which contain redundant or contradictory language, specifically involving things like sign placement, permits, fees, and removal. So, after some work, we have a set of proposed changes in these three resolutions. The first resolution is a set of 16 edited, added, or removed passages in sections 1 through 6 of Appendix D, which is the official sign ordinance. It removes redundant, contradictory, or unnecessary language. It also prohibits all non-city signs that are in the city right-of-way, and this would remove the necessity for a number of different sign permits that the city currently issues. There's also an allowance for electronic signs in the Wythe Creek Road Commercial District. There is a proposed allowance for short-term temporary signs without a permit for up to 3 days. And there are also clearer regulations for political, real estate, and contractor signs. The presentation is awfully yellow. It's supposed to be white background. I'm not sure why it's yellow, but the second resolution removes Articles 2 and 4 of Chapter 6, the advertising ordinance. This removes, in most part, all of the redundant or contradictory regulations in Chapter 6, and confines all sign regulations to Appendix D only, making Appendix D the one and official sign ordinance. The third resolution is one change to Section 5 of Chapter 70, the Sidewalk Ordinance, to clarify that protection from interference only applies to city signs in the right-of-way. So now I'm going to go through a number of these changes, starting with Appendix D.
What does that mean? Protection from interference? I don't understand what we're saying.
Chapter 70 currently says, and I'm paraphrasing, Mr. Vice Mayor, that no person may interfere with any sign erected in a public right-of-way. It doesn't say governmental sign. So as I said, we have an ordinance that both says stand up and sit down. We have an ordinance existing that signs can't be in certain places. We have another ordinance that says no person may interfere with any sign erected. So this would clarify that under the public sidewalks, which is really a public infrastructure section, that only the public signs and the public, so you can't interfere with a street sign or a stop sign or
I just
limit sign.
didn't understand exactly what that meant. How it was written. Okay.
Okay. So I'll go through the changes, starting with Appendix D, which should be labeled A1 in your packet. I'll try and go through these changes as clearly as I can, but feel free to interrupt me at any time with any questions. So starting with Appendix D, Section 1. The first section is the definitions section, and I've added a definition of political signs. The ordinance discusses political signs but does not define them, so we have added a definition stating that a political sign is any outdoor sign of a temporary nature erected for the purpose of soliciting support or votes for or in opposition to a political party or candidate who is seeking nomination or election, or any public question included on a ballot in an election or voting event held under the laws of the state. That's a rather wordy definition, but it was crafted to include both ballot measures, city council resolutions, and any signs pertaining to local, state, or federal elections. So in addition, two definitions in Section 1 have been modified. The first one is the definition of portable signs. The last sentence has been modified to point to Section 3 of Appendix D rather than Section 5 of rather than Chapter 6. Since that language discussing portable signs is not in Chapter 6 and it's slated to be removed, we want this to point back to Appendix D, to the sign ordinance. The last is simply the removal of the word sign from the definition of sign. This is more of just a grammatical change to make the definition flow better.
Before you move on, I'm thinking as we're moving, political sign. I can think potentially that there may be some signs that somebody might want to erect that may not be particularly about a public question that's on a ballot, but it might be about a public question that's a current topic. That do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It says in an election or on a vote.
But
If something come before council, it would be in a vote, wouldn't it?
I'm thinking about a political movement type of a thing that may not be necessarily coming up for any particular vote, but something that may simply be in the news. Do you know what I mean?
Let's cut to, I'll cut straight, I think, to your question. I'd like to just talk facts, right at the base level. You're talking about like the no wall.
Something like that, or LGBT, stuff like that.
Okay. So the question would be,
Topics.
are we picking them up by the,
Is this enough?
that's all we're asking. I think that's her question.
I'll take a shot. Right now, we don't have a definition at all. We struggle with that. I think we intended here to do what is a sort of what might be perceived as a normal definition. If we need to expand the definition, you'll find as we discuss this, there may be things that you think need to be modified that are part of our current ordinance. For example, the question that you had posed to me earlier on a sign that doesn't fit this description It's not a contractor sign, it's not a real estate sign, it's not a political sign. What is it? Your current ordinance prohibits those kinds of signs. If those kind being any kind that is not one of those types, if the council would like to provide provisions as sort of a general catch-all for any other types of sign, we just need some direction if you frame that in a draft. There are plenty of signs right now in this city that are not in conformance with this ordinance, and we have struggled because of the nature of our ordinances, which are conflicting, and in some case, like I said, sit up and down at the same time.
I think so. So I think what I'm hearing is we ought to at least investigate this particular language and see if it picks up something anti a particular issue.
Hunting, yeah, anything.
It could be we're against hunting, or we're against this or that in the public right of way. So just explore that and try to put some language in there.
Just so that I'm clear, I think we can add language that allows people to express opinion as well on their property. As written, there are no signs other than governmental signs allowed on public property or on public right of way.
Okay.
Right.
So maybe it's covered. I think that's the question. So.
It's the question of if you have any of those types of signs, pro-hunting.
I just wanted to know, I think the definition of political topic is, if it's a pro or anti-something, I think that's political.
We can modify the language to
Okay.
take care of that. It wasn't an intention to exclude that. Again, we've had, in a previous conversation today, I was talking about, someone asked how we were restricting something, and I said, well, in our view, if something's not allowed now, and we're adding to it, we're not restricting. So we didn't mean to specifically restrict that. Your current ordinance prohibits it.
Okay.
So if you'd like us to modify the language to be more inclusive, that's an easy thing for us to do.
Okay.
Well, does the definition of sign cover her question?
It does not, because there is a provision in your ordinance that essentially says if it's not a type of sign specifically delineated, it's prohibited. So I think we can clear it up. I think we understand what you're looking for.
It doesn't
There's a
matter.
couple
I just
good
need it
examples,
defined.
Hey, what I would remind council is if we accomplish this, it'll be a great improvement over what we've got. But I'm sure that we may have to come back and touch it again.
Right.
So, but if you'll investigate that.
Absolutely.
The one thing on the portable sign, the one thing that popped in my mind at that point, those trucks that drive around with the messages, does that pick them up? Or does that, what I'm talking about, the big flatbed
While
trucks
moving?
that drive around, paid to advertise? You don't know, that's okay.
I don't know, but I'll take a shot at it anyway.
Okay.
I think that up to this point, we have not
Seen that.
done anything with regard to signs that were moving on a public street.
Okay.
Your ordinance as drafted doesn't contemplate that. If you'd like us to, we can look at that under the.
I'm not saying that we need to, but at least the way I read that, it starts to say that you can't have them, at least the way that I seem to be a portable sign, not to be construed. If I put an election banner on the back of my car, this appears to say that that's a portable sign.
Most of your commercial vehicles have some kind of sign on them advertising their
Agreed.
business, so
Agree.
it all comes into that, too.
We absolutely can look at that. I would just note, again, if you look, the only parts that we're suggesting changed from your current adopted ordinance are the ones with the strike-throughs. That is your current definition.
Okay.
And this has not been a problem. Doesn't mean it won't become one. But if you would like us to look into that, we'll be pleased to.
I think to make it and counsel, correct me if I'm heading in the wrong direction here, but I think what we're going to want to understand is maybe some examples of, if we adopt this, these are the types of things that would or would not be allowed.
Okay.
And that's, I think, what we're looking for. A layman's guide to some very complicated words.
Understood, and I think we can try to answer that, but just for the people looking at home, if you do not adopt this definition of portable signs, it's still in your code.
I agree.
So I'll try to differentiate both.
Did I get it right? You kind of look puzzled.
Well, I don't know whether this is the time to get into it, but this whole thing to me is treading very lightly on people's rights to express their views and free speech. And I know that in this ordinance they're calling it the city right-of-way. It is a public right-of-way, and we're denying the public of the use of their right-of-way. I am not for prohibiting any signs in the right-of-way. I think it's wrong. This means that PEF, Kiwanis, all of our service organizations, the youth sports, will no longer be able to put the sign like that's right out here at the end of City Hall Avenue. I think that's wrong. We're denying them the right of free speech.
Well, I think you're.
I don't care how you define the sign. The definition's fine with me. But when you start prohibiting from the public right away, I think you're heading in the wrong direction.
So, not here to decide yes or no, and I hear your point, and I think it's a valid point. I think that might be covered under temporary signs for limited periods of time. That's why I said I think we're going to need a
We're not there
layman's
yet.
guide as we go through this.
We're getting there.
If I could,
Like
Mayor,
garage sale signs, they're going to be allowed later on.
Yes, sir. There is a provision for temporary signs of a limited duration, which is defined by 72 hours on private property. Again, we're reflecting the preliminary guidance we got from the City Council at your retreat to remove public or non-governmental signs from all of the public rights-of-way. Obviously, you haven't made a formal decision on that and can change your mind. But in the instance of the temporary sign, it still needs to be on private property. It means you can't, under that definition, you can't tape it to the stop sign, as we often see, or the yield sign, or whatever. So I don't know that, using the examples that Councilman Green was bringing up, if the Education Foundation or Little League or someone like that wanted to put out a sign, they would just have to put it on the other side of the curb with the permission of the landlord. That's what the draft says anyway.
Then you get into the sticky wicket as where is the right-of-way. We've got so many different widths of right-of-way around here, you couldn't find all of them. The city doesn't even know where their right-of-way is. So you're trying to prohibit something you can't define, so you're writing an ordinance you can't enforce.
Hold on, and this is exactly the reason why we're having this in a work session, but what I would say is that this is basically what we sort of said, okay, well, we need some guidance. We need to control signs in a better manner. That's not to say that we can't write certain sections to allow certain things. I think what we're really trying to say is we shouldn't have 2,000 signs out there, and we probably have 2,000 out there right now.
Right.
Okay, I think that's all we're trying to head to, and we're going to have to work at this language. And this is not something we're going to pass, without a lot of explanation. But let's get through. I think what we are going to listen to tonight, and I hear you, and I'm not disagreeing with you. That you're getting close, especially political and all that sort of stuff, to free speech. So we'll all have to figure that out. But let's get through this and with the goal in mind, and then we'll come back and see how we have to adapt the language, or if we can adapt the language.
Okay. So, yeah, some of these changes are more in-depth and more controversial than others. Moving on to Section 2, Administration. 2A, Authorization, had some added language to it, excluding signs not requiring permits as described in Section 5. just to clarify what is and what is not authorized by this. 2C, also the filing fee, specifying the fees for permits. That says that it is as specified on the application. There was some discussion of including an actual dollar amount for the cost of a permit. However, permit costs, there are several different costs, and also there was a resolution allowing the fee structure to be changed yearly in response to, I believe it was the rate of inflation. So instead of simply having to update a dollar value every single year, we would just specify that you could find the amount on the application itself. All right, Section 3, permitted signs. Added language to the provision for electronic message signs, stating that electronic message signs are also permitted in the central B2 commercial district along with Creek Road.
I have a problem with that restriction.
Okay, so I think we're kind of saying, are we saying only on With Creek Road, or are we saying business districts
Right,
within the city? Right.
That's my concern.
That's why I said there's a couple things I'm sure that we're all going to want to change.
All right. So Section 4, prohibited signs. 4B, any sign erected on public land, including the city right-of-way or easement, other than those erected at the direction of a duly authorized public authority, is prohibited. So that is the line prohibiting non-public signs in the city right-of-way. So there's also removed language in Section 4, 4I. Any sign consisting of illuminated tubing or strings of light outlining property lines, the word or open sales areas is omitted. That was put in there as a way to allow, I believe it was the sale of Christmas trees on Christmas tree lots, when they string up lights to illuminate a lot that is selling Christmas trees or other holiday decorations. That line was omitted to allow those to continue to exist. On 4L, any sign extending more than 20 feet above ground level is prohibited, except that freestanding signs within shopping centers constructed pursuant to Section 3 of this ordinance may be constructed to a maximum height of 25 feet above ground level. That entire section has been removed. There is also already a provision in Section 3 for commercial signs. That is a different height limit that conflicts with this, so this was chosen to be removed. Please note that there are some signs within the city, particularly the large one at the Poquoson Shopping Center, that would be deemed illegal by removing this paragraph. However, since they are already in existence, they would be grandfathered onto the property and will be allowed to continue to exist until they are taken down. All right, Section 5, signs not requiring permits. So, again, signs erected by the duly constituted governing body or public school system. That language was added to make sure to clarify that both school employees and public employees would be able to place signs without requiring a permit. So 5J, contractor signs, one per property during construction, not to exceed 3 square feet in total area. A single contractor's sign not to exceed 24 square feet in total area is permitted for any development requiring a site plan approval. The existing provision for contractor signs allows for one large sign. Language was added to allow for both one small sign per property under development, as well as one larger sign for a larger development such as a subdivision that would require a site plan approval and that is being developed by a single contractor. So 5K, the provision for real estate signs. If signs permitted under this paragraph may be erected until sale of the property. So this is removing the time limit for real estate signs, allowing them to be in place until the property is sold. Right.
I have a question on this one. Contractor signs, but you're talking about a house being built. What about a sign, let's say somebody's getting replacement windows, and they put a sign up after they're finished and say, done by so-and-so.
That's what it's intended. That's the small sign here.
It says during construction. They usually leave them up a week or so afterwards. I mean, and during construction makes it sound like you're talking about building a house. If they're just renovating it, changing the windows out, heating and air conditioning.
As I would interpret it, it's during that home improvement project. Council would like it to continue for some specified or unspecified time after that. We would need to modify this.
Well, I mean, I replaced all the windows in my house, and it took them 3 days. I think a business ought to be able to advertise longer than that after he's done the job.
But it would be nice to be able to put a limit on that, too.
Oh, put a limit on
Yeah.
it, but I mean, but then again,
Right.
how are you going to enforce it?
The
Pull up the
problem
sign.
The problem is that some of the improvements and the modeling improvements don't necessarily require a permit. So from an enforcement standpoint, it would be very difficult for us to identify when the construction started and when it stopped.
Man,
Under a time limit. But if if we can, determine that construction is actually occurring, then we have the enforceable method at that point. So put a time limit on it, we could certainly do that, but like I said, there's some improvements that occur without a permit, so we're not going to know when the work actually began and ended. That's the reason why we were actually tying it to the construction, because that was the time limit that we could actually identify.
We could just put a maximum time limit on it, period.
Neighbors will take care of it.
Yeah. No longer than a
why
month
should
or
we
whatever.
care if a business advertises if he's done work in somebody's house?
Right. But just put a maximum time limit on it, and that way, we could keep track.
The issue, in part, Mr. Green, is because we also see these signs come up at properties in which they've done no work on that house. And without requiring a permit, it's difficult to differentiate between the two. But, as I would say, your current ordinance allows one sign per property during construction. The languages of a concern specifically is in your current ordinance. We certainly can amend it.
So, continuing on Section 5, provision for political signs. This has been modified a great deal. Political signs on private property in residential or non-residential zoning districts. For signs exceeding 3 square feet, property owners shall be limited to one single political sign on private property, not to exceed 12 square feet in size and 6 feet in height above ground level. All political signs must be removed within 30 days of the conclusion of the election, voting event, or other announced event for which the sign is advertising.
They don't need 30 days. Make that 3. Get rid of that 0.
If I may add, based on the point raised for the definition of political signs, the reason that definition was constructed that way was kind of framing it in terms of political events
Right.
in the official political process.
Right.
And
And
that
I
ties into
understand
the
that.
time limit
Yeah,
for after a voting event is
Okay.
passed. So,
that's perfectly fine.
I would add, we attempted to differentiate. There was a question about the small signs. You literally could have 1,000 of them on your property if you wished to, and the limit here is really on the larger sign. As you see, almost that entire section is underlined, which means it's proposed new. Right now, political signs are permitted on private property. Should you wish to in no way restrict them, you certainly could remove all of the underlined property, or underlined sections. The reason that we put forward the limit on the larger sign is they're wind hazards. They depending on where they are, they can be line of sight hazards. Another thing. That was its intent. You can of course modify that or change it in any way, but it in no way attempts to restrict the number of the smaller signs on private property as long as it's there with the permission of the property owner.
I know we say it's got to be removed within 30 days, but I'd like to see some language as to how soon they can go up.
Amen.
We talked,
That's as important as taking it down.
I don't
But
disagree.
again, does that affect my freedom of speech?
Well, that's true. How far you want to go with it?
One of the issues that we wrestled with, and I don't disagree at all. One of the issues that we wrestle with, though, is particularly if you've got a primary event. Let's say the primaries we had, and had signs up, and we don't in this ordinance say how free or when your timing is before the election. And we don't say afterwards, because again, it's on private property. I'm not sure how we wouldn't have the authority to go into private property to remove that. Not easily, anyway. We get your point, but we just couldn't find a way that seemed to work for us. But if somebody's got a good suggestion or just an idea we can research, more than pleased to hear it.
They gave you a real winning one to do your first presentation on, didn't they?
Exciting so far.
Hey, you're doing great. Just keep going. Like I said, I think there's a lot of great points, and this will be a work in progress.
That's why it's a work session, right?
Go ahead.
All right, so moving on, still in Section 5, the provision for temporary signs. There's been a couple things added here. Any such sign must not exceed 3 square feet in area and must be removed within 7 days following the event announced. So that's an added size restriction to temporary signs. There's also, at the end, unless placed by a duly authorized city or public school system representative, under no circumstances shall temporary signs be placed on public land, including the city right-of-way or easement.
Yep.
All right. The last one is entirely new, 5P. Short-term temporary signs. If conforming to the size and content restrictions permitted in subsection O, O is in red because what is in your booklet is a typo. It should be O, not M. Permitted in subsection O above may be erected on private property without requiring a permit or consent of the duly recognized governing representative, provided that said signs are not erected for more than 72 hours. Short-term signs must also clearly advertise a specific date for any advertised event, are limited to 3 signs per specific event, and must be removed within 24 hours following the announced event. This came up because we issue permits for garage sale signs specifically, but other small events, this would eliminate the need for that, but it would try and impose a kind of an enforceable format with a sign that has a date on it so that we can know when it was put up and when it needs to be taken down.
Okay.
Finally, some small changes to Section 6, General Regulations. 6A1, unless otherwise specified in Sections 3 or 5, freestanding signs shall be located at least 5 feet from any property line, including right-of-way lines. And also, there are some reserved sections, numbers 2, 5, and 7, from Section 6A4, which we removed since there was no need for them. They were superfluous. So that does it for the first resolution. The second resolution, labeled B1, is on Chapter 6, the advertising ordinance. And specifically, it just removes Articles 2 and 4 of Chapter 6. Article 2 is titled Miscellaneous Advertising and Notices. It has sections outlining political signs, the removal of hazard, exclusions, required fees, deposits, and failure to remove signs. All of these will either be irrelevant should provisions for things like political signs permits be removed, or redundant since they are already discussed in Appendix D. Article 4 is titled Signs in Public Right-of-Way. It has a number of sections involved regulating signs in the public right-of-way and sign permits. If signs in the public right-of-way are deemed to be no longer allowed, then this entire section would be unnecessary, and it would therefore be removed. So its removal is somewhat contingent on proposed changes to Appendix D. And the final resolution is amending one section, Section 5 of Chapter 70. stating that it shall be unlawful for any person to interfere in any way with signs, poles, or structures legally erected by the city of Poquoson within the public right-of-way on any street in the city. So, as the city manager discussed, this current provision basically says it's illegal to tamper with any sign in the right-of-way, no matter who puts it up. This clarifies it to extend that protection only to publicly placed signs.
Why is it, I thought it was also illegal to interfere with a sign that, say, I put up if I'm running for election. Isn't it illegal to, you've just eliminated that by the city of Poquoson?
The current ordinance says here that no person can interfere with any signs, but we have already in other code sections requirements, permit processes, and restrictions for areas where signs can be. Right now, because of this conflict, if any person were to put any sign in the public right-of-way, this would tell us that it's unlawful to interfere with it. And if we're going to restrict, non-governmental signs from public rights-of-way, we need to clarify this section. But
within the public right-of-way. Okay.
Even if we leave any foreseeable version of signs in public right-of-way, we still need the lawful authority to remove the ones that are not legally placed or are not there with a permit or deemed unsafe. For example, there are provisions prohibiting right now signs within proximity to our major intersections. There's been a historic practice that's not in an adopted ordinance prohibiting signs in certain portions of Victory Boulevard. We talked about that at the retreat. This conflicts with the other sections. Now, if council ultimately believes that there should be no restrictions on signs in the public right-of-way, then we might want to not make this change. But right now, it makes it very difficult, if not impossible, to forcefully enforce your current ordinance, and it would be counter to the proposed change.
Well, my point is that putting in by the city of Poquoson would be redundant if we make the change in the law. And because if we have the law that only the city of Poquoson can use the right-of-way, then having the rules, even without that phrase in there.
If I could.
Yes.
If in its original form, which is the form without the line in, if you were to prohibit it in the other sections, but allow it here, if somebody were to place a sign.
Legally erected.
Just place it. Just
legally.
place it.
Structures legally erected.
Right.
Put that in.
Well, that's new language, but in your current form, if somebody put in an illegal sign or a prohibited sign.
No, put it legally, though. I put those structures legally. Put that in.
Agreed.
But by the city of Poquoson, I'm saying is maybe not necessary. Because there may be a reason, there may be a conditional use permit, or there may be a reason that we permit something for some reason that wasn't by the city of Poquoson. That's my point, just that one phrase.
I know we're pressed for time, but if you go back to 5P real quick, just want to make sure that we're not limiting or explain that about the 3 signs per specific event. Are we saying that you got a garage sale, you only put up 3 signs?
Yeah, that was just a number that was proposed.
We are.
That's what the number says, but again,
So we can only put 3 in the entire city?
unless for that garage sale,
For
or
that
for
one
that
garage sale.
Kiwanis breakfast, or for that, and that's why I'm saying there will be a lot of give and take in all of this.
You can't even get to the location with 3 signs directing you.
That's true.
All right, so
That needs to be 30. I'll give you a 0.
all right, so because it is we are running out of time, and
Place it behind the tree.
let's go back to kind of try to reground the public, certainly, who are probably going to look at this and go, I don't know what they're doing. All right, so what council did was we all came together and we said, hey, we've got a proliferation of signs out there, and it's starting to get out of hand. We've got, and it can be business, it can be political, it can be youth football, it can be anybody, or it can be the combination of all of those. So simply stated, we kind of handed the staff the unenviable task of satisfying each one of our personal viewpoints on that, and then the viewpoints of the public. So it's going to be a sticky issue. All right, it's going to be very difficult to come to consensus. So what I think is the next step here is they've laid out some language for us to consider. I think that we need to schedule another longer work session to kind of go through and have those discussions amongst council of, just like you were saying, buddy, I don't, we're stepping on somebody's rights to express their views, or we're not treating our civic league or civic groups appropriately. I think we need to iron that out so that we can let staff know how to rewrite that ordinance, that we can get a consensus. Or the consensus may simply be it's good enough as is. But they've taken their stab at it. What I would tell you is great job. Boy, first presentation, you did a great job trying to keep this group under control, and I appreciate it. And Randy, great job to you and the staff for writing what you believe you heard. And council, we have a lot of work to do on this.
We need to spend more time on this ourselves,
right,
to get better direction.
Right.
Yes,
Okay.
we do.
So, and I agree with everything that everybody said here tonight, so don't take that in any way. I think there's some very valid points. So with that said, we'll set up another work session. I'll close this work session and ask that we move to the dais and get the regular meeting going.